So if you could please take your seats so we can start the final plenary on casualty recording, a fundamental tool to preserve lives. I'll turn the floor over to the next chair, Director Khalifa Lawan from the National Mine Action Centre in Nigeria. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, let me use this opportunity to welcome you back to the meeting. Before taking most of our time, let me quickly introduce the panelists here and set the meeting rolling. With me here, I have a pleasure to introduce Mr. Meera Muhiadeen Nayeemudeen, the National Mine Action Director of Sri Lanka. He's here by my right, immediate right, yeah? I also have with me here Ms. Francesca Marotta, Chief Methodology of the Learning Policy and Practice Section of OHCHR. Ms. Francesca, you're welcome. I also have on this part Mr. Rory Pouwels, work with UNICEF Emergency Division in Geneva, and is the coordinator for Global Child Protection Area of Responsibility. Mr. Roy, you're welcome. You're welcome. I also have here with me Ms. Lisa Müller-Dormann, the Humanitarian Disarmament and Peacebuilding Coordinator at DRC. She also serves as the Global Mine Action Area of Responsibility Coordinator as part of the Global Protection Cluster. So you're welcome. I also have the last but not the least, Mr. Rory Collins, the Global IAM and Analytic Advisor for the UNOPS Peace and Security Cluster. You're welcome. Well, you will believe with me that the casualty incident reporting is a key to the successful or to any successful program in mine action. Without adequate reporting, without thorough in reporting, the mine action program that we have around us in our respective countries will not have the adequate data, will not have the data that will translate into our information sector, that will also translate into possible data for resource mobilization. So that is why the NDMUN28 find it necessary to bring it as a topic of discussion, to discuss and find an analysis way that we can use data and incident reporting in building our data and in having a thorough understanding of what kind of incident do we need to have reported, where it should be reported, who is reporting it, and what we can do with the data collected. So this is going to set the agenda of our discussion on this side. I hope that we're going to learn from the teaming panelists that we have here on this side. From beginning, I will ask Mr. Meera, right on my right. Mr. Meera, can you please showcase how injury surveillance has been used to prioritize and shape mine action intervention in Sri Lanka, please? Okay. He wants to go to the podium. He finds it interesting talking on the podium.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to share some of our experience, Sri Lankan experience, with this great forum. From the very inception of Sri Lanka Mine Action Program, casualty recording has been recognized as a vital process, one that goes beyond data collection. It is a compassionate mechanism designed to ensure close surveillance of mine and explosive ordnance of victims, enabling decision makers to respond needs of affected individuals. At its core, Casualty recording is an expression of love of those who suffered, for their families, and for future generation who deserves to live free from fear. Ladies and gentlemen, in our program, we are centralized platform called Information Management System for Mine Action IMSMA, developed by GICHT. This system serves as the sole national database for recording all mine action activities, including accidents and casualties. Every recorded details contributes to a broader effort to prevent further tragedies and to deliver care where it is most needed. Ladies and gentlemen, to date, Sri Lanka IMSMA has documented 1,765 victims. This data is not merely numbers. It represents real people, real pain, and real work that must be done to bring healing. These records are crucial for relevant government agencies to provide effective victim assistance. They enable targeted support to mine and EO victims through rehabilitation, medical care, and socio-economic inclusion. I just want to share with you some of the key services provided. The first one, medical assistance and prosthetic support. The government of Sri Lanka has made significant strides in providing medical assistance and prosthetic care through its national healthcare system. These services are delivered primarily by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Rural Development, Social Security and Community Empowerment. All recorded victims, including 1,765 individuals affected, have had access to necessary rehabilitation and primary care free of charge at healthcare units closer to their homes. Specialized support, such as prosthetic limbs and ongoing rehabilitation, is offered throughout the regional centers in north and eastern part of Sri Lanka. For instance, in 2024, during a demining operation, 5 individuals injured in an accident. Thanks to the established referral mechanism, they received immediate treatment at nearby hospitals, and 2 were further referred to the General Hospital for specialized care. The swift responses underlines how effective system backed by accurate casualty data can save lives. Ladies and gentlemen, looking ahead, by the end of 2025, Sri Lanka plans to improve referral pathways to ensure comprehensive support for mine victims, particularly in northern and eastern provinces, under the Strategic Objective 2 of National Mine Action Completion Strategy 2023-2027. Psychological and social support for victims and families. This is one of the services we are providing to victim assistance. Beyond physical healing, psychological and social support is essential. The Department of Social Services implements several programs to support victims and their families. These include vocational training for persons with disabilities to enhance their employability, and community-based rehabilitation, support network at divisional, district, and national levels to facilitate coordination and assistance, the rehabilitation of visually handicapped trust fund, which offers vital support to visually impaired individuals, and medical welfare services deployed through officers stationed in base hospital to assist low-income families. Additionally, the Aswesuma, it is a Sri Lankan term, National Cash Grant Program provides financial assistance to low-income individuals, including persons with disabilities affected by economic crisis. This program helps restore dignity and reduce vulnerability. Ladies and gentlemen, apart from these services, and we are concentrating on policy and institutional strengthening, Sri Lanka is also taking decisive policy-level actions. A newly Disability Right Act is being drafted to replace the 1996 legislation, aligning with UN Convention on Right of Persons with Disabilities, UNCRPD. And our cabinet has already approved the Disability Right Act in 2025 February. This bill, once enacted, will enhance the legal framework for victims' assistance and disability inclusion. And you can see this slide, and in 2000 and 2001, the casualty recorded in Sri Lanka is very high. And through these, the best practices, you could be able to make it very minimum in 2025. To better understand the evolving needs of victims, the National Mine Action Center, in coordination with the Ministries of Health and Social Services, launched a Victim Assistance Need Assessment Survey in 2024. Its finding, expected by this month, April 2025, will enable more targeted and impactful program for mine or EO survivors. A major milestone this year is agreement between NMAC and the Ministry of Health to include landmines and EO-related injuries as recognized causes of disability in the National Injury Surveillance System. This will allow for more accurate tracking and responsive planning as part of the strategic objective of 2 of completion strategy. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, casualty recording is not just about numbers or charts. It is deeply human process. It preserves the stories of survivors, honors the memory of those lost, and fuels efforts to create safer, more inclusive future. Through accurate records, compassionate policies, and coordinated care, we ensure that no victim is forgotten and no need goes unmet. In this way, casualty recording becomes a vital tool to preserve love for our fellow citizens, for peace, and for humanity. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Meera. I want to appreciate you for sharing your experience in casualty reporting that will help in building a strong program development and also attract national policy and possible resource mobilization. Casualty reporting, if it is adequate, will go a long way in helping us achieve multiple activities, more especially when the reporting is adequate. And on this note, may I call for Francesca to shed more light on how casualty recording has an impact on human rights. Please, Francesca, you have the floor.
Okay, it's connected now. Yes, I think it does. Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be able to share the experience of UN Human Rights, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, on casualty recording, and perhaps discuss ways in which we can strengthen collaboration with the mine action community based on our respective experience. For the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, casualty recording is the systematic collection and verification of information on individual deaths, and in several instances also injuries, in situations of violence, including crisis and arrest, and very often armed conflict, of course. We see this as an integral part of our efforts to monitor respect for international law, including preventing and reducing violations and harm, increasing protection of individuals, and supporting justice, assistance, and reparation for victims. And we have heard some examples of how this can be done at the national level from the previous presentation. We have carried out casualty recording over time in very different contexts, including, for example, Afghanistan, the occupied Palestinian territory, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, and Ukraine. And we continue to do so in most of these contexts. In most situations, we try to collect data both on individuals who are killed and injured. Our casualty recording work is based on a rigorous and transparent methodology, which ensures that the information we collect is accurate, reliable, and objective, and also that any limitations in the data is clear, because this is work that can be very challenging depending on the context, and very resource intensive, of course. The methodology involves gathering information from multiple independent sources, also assessing, of course, the credibility and the reliability of each of the sources. And our data are disaggregated, among other things, by gender, age, cause of death, including planted explosives and unexploded ordnances, and of course, victim status. For example, looking at the work done by our human rights monitoring mission in Ukraine, between February 2022, the beginning of Russia's attack on Ukraine, and March 2025, our office documented that mines and explosive remnants of war were the third cause of civilian casualties in Ukraine, after explosive weapons with wide area effects and other conflict-related incidents. By documenting both the situation of individuals, individual victims, and patterns of harm and conduct, casualty recording provides an evidence base to understand better situations and dynamics, and inform action and responses by political, military, or humanitarian actors. In our experience, casualty recording has produced a variety of human rights impacts for individuals, for families, and for communities at large, ranging from protection of the right to life, to health, education, remedies, social assistance, freedom of movement, for example. With conflict increasing across the world, of course, it's never been more important to document the toll on civilians and to leverage this information to protect human rights. Casualty recording can also be useful, and has been useful, in focusing the attention of the international community on the human cost of violence, identifying groups and communities that are more vulnerable or affected or at risk of being affected by violence and conflict. It has been used also to identify early warning signals and critical hotspots to develop responses for increased protection, and also indicating future risks of violence. It can support the mapping of actors of groups at risk, trigger investigations into violations of international law, and promote accountability. And it can also promote changes in behavior and practice by conflict parties to the means and tactics employed in war that cause civilian harm. In a few contexts, casualty recording, by providing comprehensive documentation of deaths and injuries, has also facilitated access by victims and victims' families to rights and benefits such as pensions, education, healthcare, employment and vocational training, housing or veteran benefits, and has also promoted policy or legal changes in line with what we have also heard in the previous presentation. The casualty recording information that our office produces also provide the basis for the Secretary General's assessment of the impact on the protection of civilians in his reports to the Security Council, and to measure progress on Goal 16 of the Sustainable Development Goals on peace, justice, and strong institutions. These casualty records in particular are an information source for the indicator on conflict deaths, on which we report annually. For the entire period since we have started gathering this data for the indicator, so between 2015 and 2024, we have recorded close to 357,000 conflict-related deaths in 16 situations of armed conflict, of which 6% was caused by planted explosives and unexploded ordnance. I should say that it's not always easy in all contexts to document systematically the cause of death, so these are data that really evolve based on the information that we managed to gather. And now the overall annual figures on conflict-related deaths have been growing dramatically since 2022, with an increase in casualties by 40% last year compared to the previous year. Last month, the Human Rights Council here in Geneva adopted a resolution on the impact of anti-personnel mines on the enjoyment of human rights, and it highlighted that casualty recording information informs the prioritization of mine action activities, such as risk education, demining, and victim assistance, making a positive contribution to the promotion and protection of human rights. In fact, our research indicates how the use of casualty recording information in clearance operations of mines and explosive remnants of war can most directly impact rights to life, health, and freedom of movement. Our UNMAS colleagues use this data to prioritize activities and monitor progress against the UN strategy on mine action and for their own advocacy work. Disaggregated casualty recording data on landmines can be used to measure the impact on and foster compliance with human rights and prioritize, of course, mine action activities. As another example, in the context of our work in Yemen, OHCHR casualty records revealed that children constituted the majority of all civilian casualties from mines and unexploded ordnance, and also identified the location of incidents. Investigations then showed that many incidents amounted to violations of international humanitarian law, and that the parties had failed to take all feasible precautions to minimize civilian casualties. The findings were then used to remind the parties of their obligations under international law, and including to record, mark, and clear landmines in areas under their control, and to take care to minimize the indiscriminate effects of landmines. As we continue our efforts to systematically document casualties in an increasing number of conflicts, we also need to strengthen efforts for collaboration, including with the mine action community, and we very much look forward to discuss what may be most useful in supporting each other's work. By way of example, with our rights-based approach, of course, we can complement the efforts by mine action practitioners by making available information that can, through disaggregated data, facilitate the identification of vulnerable individuals and groups at risk, as well as duty bearers. So I will stop here and then look forward to discussion further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Thank you very much for sharing United Nations experience about mine action casualty reporting which relate to human rights. I'm sure this your presentation will go a long way in helping us analyzing and making prioritizing the area of casualty reporting in our day-to-day activities in our respective mine action program. But come to think of mine casualty reporting will relate to the children and armed conflict agenda and the UN monitoring and reporting mechanism, and demonstration why this work is crucial to mine action. On this note, I will invite Mr. Rory to give us some familiarization on that topic. Mr. Roy, please have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me in this panel to talk about casualty recording from a children and armed conflict perspective, and more in particular, the Children and Armed Conflict, or CAC, agenda of the UN on taking action to end and prevent grave violations against children. 25 years ago, to be more precise, in December 1996, actually, the United Nations General Assembly took an unprecedented decision to create a mandate to protect children from hostilities and adopted a resolution which created the Children and Armed Conflict Mandate. This followed the groundbreaking report by Graça Machel on the impact of armed conflict on children. The Children and Armed Conflict agenda is structured around 14 Security Council resolutions to date, and it's the only thematic agenda that has a dedicated Security Council working group on children and armed conflict. This was established in 2005 by Resolution 1612, and it is the body that receives the information by the United Nations on a regular basis on the situation of children in armed conflict. The crux of this agenda is the Secretary General Annual Report on Children and Armed Conflict. This is an evidence-based report based on the information that has been collected and verified by the United Nations on the ground. It is the evidence that then informs the listing of the Secretary General, or the so-called annex of the Secretary General report, which lists parties to conflict that engage in patterns or trends of violations against children. It is a powerful list and a powerful tool because it enables the UN to engage on this agenda with parties to the conflict. The Special Representative of the Secretary General on Children and Armed Conflict, Ms. Virginia Gamba, is the global focal point and advocacy lead for the CAC agenda. She, for example, supports and facilitates the work of country task forces. The ultimate goal, of course, of the CAC agenda is to end and prevent grave violations. Next slide, please. I don't have the... Yes, thank you. The objectives, of course, is to end and prevent grave violations. And as you can see here, what we are trying to do to protect children affected by armed conflict through the enhanced accountability of parties to conflict. And here we can, in this blue text, you can see examples of how mine action can contribute to the CAC agenda, so to advocate around IHL and human rights. We also hope to achieve reduced occurrence of grave violations of child rights through engagement. And again, here, an area where mine action can come in. And then there's the provision of an appropriate response to violations, including political advocacy, and for UNICEF, importantly, a programmatic response. Mine action interventions, be it clearance, advocacy, victim assistance, or stockpile destruction, contribute to the CAC agenda as they contribute to prevent or respond to certain grave violations affecting children in armed conflicts. Explosive ordnance accidents are one form of grave violations, and I'll come back to that, which is highly preventable. So what is the monitoring reporting mechanism? What is actually monitored? In the famous Security Council Resolution 1612 adopted in 2005, the UN is mandated to establish a monitoring reporting mechanism at the country level, so-called MRM, to collect timely, objective, accurate, and reliable information on 6 grave violations. Those 6 grave violations are recruitment and use of children, rape and other forms of sexual violence, abduction of children, attacks on schools and hospitals and related personnel, and denial of humanitarian access to children, and more importantly for the mine action area of work, killing and maiming of children. The ones where you see an asterisk mentioned are the trigger violations for actually listing parties in the annex of the report of the Secretary General. So what needs to be monitored are, first of all, the 6 grave violations, which you have on the top right of the screen. What is being primarily monitored is those grave violations perpetrated against a child. The victim can only be a child under 18 years of age, and the perpetrator is a party to the conflict. The violation has to be linked to a conflict. It has to have a nexus with conflict. It cannot be a personal crime, so a criminal violation that is not linked to the conflict. So those 3 elements that you see on the screen are the essential elements. Obviously, for the work that you're doing on mine action, the killing and maiming of children is the most relevant violation, because under this violation is where we capture all incidents of explosive weapons, including explosive ordnance that impact children. We also capture some of these violations under attacks on schools and hospitals, when these explosive ordnance impact the normal operations of schools and hospitals, and when they impact the delivery of humanitarian assistance to children in affected populations. There are also 2 additional areas of concern, but that do not constitute grave violations, and one of those is military use of schools and hospitals. It's not a grave violation, but it's also relevant to mine actions, as such use often leads to new contamination. On the killing and maiming definition, I will just focus on the one that's particularly relevant for mine action. So any action, intentional or not, resulting in the death or serious injury of a child. And for mine action, that's the important part is the death and serious injury as a result of landmine, improvised explosive devices, or unexploded ordnance. So this slide is really explaining which type of casual recording is conducted under the MRM. And maiming refers to any serious or permanent or disabling or scarring or mutilation injury to a child. So briefly mention, so where's the MRM implemented? You can hopefully see it on this map, but it's currently implemented in 26 situations of conflict. Countries are in green are situations of concern without formal MRMs. Otherwise, all the countries and situations are included in the United Nations Secretary General's annual report on children and armed conflict. And I won't go through them. You can see them here on the map. So who monitors and reports? So there is a country task force that is usually co-chaired by the UN resident coordinator or the humanitarian coordinator or the UN SRSG in country and the UNICEF representative. It's a country task force on monitoring reporting or equivalent. And each country has an independent country task force or working group overseeing the monitoring and reporting of grave violations. And the composition will vary depending on the context. For example, in Nigeria, the MRM working group is co-led by UNICEF and OHCHR, but members include UNMAS, UNFPA, UN Women, WHO, WFP, IOM, UNHCR, IRC, Street Child, Plan International, and Save the Children. The threshold, and this is important, of verification is very high, higher than in many other casualty recording systems, including the information management system for mine action. The MRM only includes data verified by the UN through primary sources. The verification standard of the MRM is high and offers lots of details. Only an incident where UN has interacted with the exploded ordnance victim, survivor, or a primary witness, and vetted and corroborated the information with other sources is the incident considered verified. So the MRM and killing and maiming is an ongoing casualty recording system. This UN-verified data may not capture the full picture, but it is extremely robust, reliable, and constantly updated. What we see in conflict is that nothing kills or injures more children than explosive weapons. The impact of explosive weapons on children caught in conflict is constantly increasing, as you see in this graph. In 2023, over 58% of children verified by the UN as killed and maimed in the 26 situations on the children and armed conflict agenda were killed or maimed by explosive weapons, predominantly in populated areas, which is a 13% increase compared to 2018. Landmines and explosive remnants of war, child casualties account for 30% of all children verified as killing and maimed by explosive weapons. The MRM is therefore a powerful tool for advocacy at global level and at national level. And I would just like to reiterate what my Sri Lankan colleague mentioned earlier. Behind these statistics are real children. So if the MRM and children armed conflict is something new to you, what are things that you can do? First of all, read the Secretary General's annual and the country-specific reports on children and armed conflict, which are available on the website of the Special Representative of the Secretary General. Check if the MRM is in place in your country. If yes, connect with the country task force or working group and explore collaboration. For example, with the management system, information management system and the MRM or vice versa, or co-develop data sharing protocols. Use the MRM data for advocacy, prioritization and design of mine action interventions, and on global advocacy and casualty recording, the landmine monitor should use MRM data. So in countries affected by armed conflict, integrating the CAC agenda into the mine action frameworks and programs will strengthen the evidence base and ultimately help deliver better results. That is, the MRM for killing and maiming is a casual recording system that can help make mine action interventions more evidence-based and more impactful. That is, more life-saving. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that insight. I hope that the distinguished listeners will learn more from this brief. We can see that we learn from a country of best practice of casualty reporting from Sri Lanka. We also learn from the United Nations Human Rights Organization how casualty reporting can be linked to human rights. We also heard from United Nations monitoring and reporting mechanism, how casualty reporting is affecting the children and armed conflict agenda. These are some of the very important reporting that we can use for our activities in our respective mine actions. But now let's move to operational aspect of casualty reporting. We expect to hear from Ms. Lisa, the operational experience where casualty recording was used effectively, highlight gaps and in funding and the need for support of data collection for effective humanitarian mine action activities in our respective communities.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much for the organizers to allow the Danish Refugee Council to be part of this plenary to discuss the relevance of casualty recording for an effective mine action response. Today I will talk a little bit about the importance of multi-sectoral programming, coordination, as well as data analysis to really use casualty recording effectively in our programming. So on the maps behind me, you see two main maps. One is basically the map where the Danish Refugee Council is present around the globe. The Danish Refugee Council is a multi-mandate organization, so we work across sectors. Mine action and peacebuilding is one of them, but we also work on shelter, on economic recovery, and on protection. And so multi-sectoral programming is very key for casualty recording. We'll hear about it in a minute through some of my examples, but we are also committed to conflict sensitivity as well as localization, which are also quite key for casualty recording. The second map that you see is from the places where the global protection or the protection cluster is active, several emergency contexts, and I'm wearing sort of two hats today on this panel, one with the Danish Refugee Council and the other one as co-coordinator of the Global Mine Action Area of Responsibility, which is the area of responsibility that sits under the protection cluster, and that UNMAS, our dear Christelle that is sitting in the audience, together with DRC, are leading at the global level, and we provide guidance as well as opportunities to be conveners and connect with other sectors across 15 different emergency settings. So how are we using casualty recording in our programming in DRC? First of all, I'd like to take you to the example of Yemen, where we work in the western part of the country, which is known to be the most contaminated, but also the area with the most casualties. At the same time, in South Sudan, we use a prioritization matrix that takes into account accidents and incidences, and this is how we do our prioritization across land release and risk education efforts, and ensure that we have a large scale geographical presence across the various areas, and take into account sort of the climate change and seasons. Then I'd like to take you to Afghanistan, which is also a country that Ron mentioned in his intervention. In Afghanistan, we have piloted multi-sectoral programming, which is something that we've done in multiple countries, but in Afghanistan, it's done through mobile response teams, and it also has allowed us to swiftly respond to casualties as they occur through a variety of data. And so it's an emergency response mechanism that we're using through quick response teams that can do both NTS, EORE, victim assistance, and disposal activities. And we've also adapted these methodologies because we saw that in the casualty data, abandoned improvised mines were actually the devices that were causing the majority of the casualties, followed by explosive remnants of war. So casualty data is extremely important to really understand and shape your response effectively. We've also engaged and done risk education at border points, because there's been an influx of displaced communities into Afghanistan, and so they are, of course, representing an at-risk community, so delivering risk education to them is absolutely key. And this brings me to a partnership that the Global Mine Action Area of Responsibility has undertaken together with IOM at the global level, which is the displacement tracking matrix. And this just underlines how casualty data by no means is enough, right? We also need data on displacement patterns, and we need to overlay those data, and we need to engage in partnerships in order to ensure that we don't ask multiple questions to multiple communities, in a duplicative manner. These are traumatized communities. These are sensitive information. So partnerships and effectively collaborating across different sectors to do these assessments is absolutely key. And this brings me to another setting where the Danish Refugee Council has been part of a victims assistance working group. We're doing that in OPT and in Ukraine, and it points to the importance of coordination. Only through coordination can we ensure that our efforts are not duplicative, and that we actually ensure follow-up. Right? When we ask, we know why we ask certain questions, and we can follow up with it with effective case management. And here, localization is really key, because in OPT, for example, we've trained partners on the victims assistance forms, on the incidents forms, and on the accidents forms, on how to fill them out. Local partners that then can help us fill gaps in terms of what the needs are of the communities and what kind of barriers exist when accessing certain services. So this is quite important to shape the response and to ensure that we have effective case management, effective referrals in the aftermath. And the Mine Action Area of Responsibility can, in those situations, also serve as a convener. Right? It can bring together local organizations. In the picture you You see one of DRC's partners in Sudan, Jasmar. So it is very important to serve as this convener space across various sectors. Lastly, I have some concluding remarks when it comes to the importance of, as I said, of multi-sectoral response and coordination, localization, but also conflict sensitivity. All of this is key to use casualty recording effectively throughout the response. I have another couple of thoughts, but I'll keep them for the second round. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lisa. Coordination, localization, and conflict sensitivity. This is the word that she concluded with. Thank you very much for sharing your experience in the field. We've been clamoring on how to get mine action activities to be prioritized by the United Nations, by regional bodies, by countries' policy. We can see that adequate capturing of the casualty will help us achieve that. But can let me ask my next speaker, Rory, can you also give us example on how real-time data availability from open source on explosive ordnance casualty and other layers of data is instrumental to mine action prioritization? Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, UNICEF, for inviting UNOPS to the plenary. We're here to show, we heard a lot about what the importance of collecting casualty data, and we'd like to show you some examples about what we can then do with that data, primarily to help plan and prioritize mine action activities across all pillars. We have a limited time for this section, so we put together a 2-minute video, 2.5-minute video, and I'll talk you through it, so please, over to you. So this is an example from Myanmar. We chose Myanmar because we wanted to highlight or underscore the use or the scalability of these tools when there's no resources, when there's no funding, when there's no capacity to do reporting on the ground. So this platform uses only open source information, where we tap into platforms like ACLID, armed conflict information, to get the casualty numbers, which is a key ground signal. We also use a host of other ground signals like population movement, security information, critical health infrastructure, flooding data from NASA, for example, and then a host of remote sensing technologies, satellite imagery, etc. So we use that to build up a more accurate threat picture, all remotely. We have been working with key researchers like MIT, Carnegie Mellon, to help us with the AI models that we use to generate our threat assessments in terms of planning and prioritization, which indicators that we focus on. So together with the decision tree here is quite important. It allows us to look into how the AI is making a decision. So when we feed it all this information, we're able to assess its own decisions. And when we have control of that, when we can see into the decision-making process of the AI models, we're able to target specific indicators that are more significant in certain AOIs than others, or mine action activities. So this is critical, as I said, to AOIs or regions that have low resources, low funding, low technical capacity. These are fairly easily scalable, as I said, remotely, and then to inform the planning and prioritization for the operations people who happen to be in the field. So we can plan and prioritize, or we can dive into this information at all different levels. It could be the country level or different admin levels, depending on the area of interest. We also have, just as an added value, set up a chatbot, which allows us to cross-reference where there's health infrastructure against the people in need, so they can find those health facilities more easily. So one thing I would note there, this all isn't done in a vacuum. We do a lot of collaboration. It requires a lot of support across the Mauritian community. We work a lot with leading institutions, like I said, like MIT, Carnegie Mellon, etc. We also have fantastic support from the Swiss government through their in-kind personnel, which is critical to our teams, and also GICHD's Innovation Hub. Things like that allow us to collectively understand what the needs are and come together, discuss how we can solve thematic-based problems, which creates a fantastic channel through which we can deliver on these innovative solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rory. Thank you, Mr. Rory. Thank you for sharing your experience. I am impressed with the stimulation and the video you show. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we can see that we've received a lot of briefing from the panelists. We now turn the focus to the plenary. Before I allow some intervention from the plenary, let me give one or two people an opportunity to say one or two words that will stimulate additional intervention from the meeting. May I call on Mr. Henry Bonning to give us his quick intervention. Mr. Henry Bonning, are you here with us?
We are trying? Yeah.
Yeah, please, we have
this
the floor.
one is working.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving us the floor. I'm Henry. I've worked in Syria to develop the victim assistance working group, and I will leave the floor to my colleague, Dr. Hannah, coming from Damascus. I just wanted to underline and to show practical example of what has been just presented by the panel members. And it's a work that has been done between the child protection subsector and the mine action subsector or areas of responsibility regarding cross-checking and using two different data sets to analyze the impact of explosive ordnance on children. And so we use from the child protection sector and UNICEF MRM dataset, and we used also the IMSMA dataset from UNMAS, technically supported by UNOPS. So I will let Dr. Anna explain how we can then use this data, because collecting data and having dataset is important, but what matters at the end of the day is what we do with that.
Yes, thank you, Henry. I would like to add also, as a VA specialist, that using this data and analysis of this data will help us to anticipate the needs of children in terms of number and range. For instance, if we are going to, in the field of assistive technology, knowing the number and age range of children who are affected will help us in the procurement plan of assistive devices. For example, the number of wheelchairs, the sizes of the wheelchairs, number of sizes of the prosthetics component, and also the priority of the geographical priority of the rehab center for further supplies. So in general, this will help us also as a result in the establishment of specific referrals for children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hannah. I thank you very much for sharing your experience, and we can see where the casualty reporting in another perspective. The next is we may want to see a display of a video from a Syrian network. Are we ready for that? Syrian network, is there any footage from that? Please.
colleagues, and humanitarian advocates. Today, I stand before you to address one of the most insidious legacies of the Syrian conflict, the widespread contamination of landmines that continue to claim innocent lives daily. The scale of contamination. With the fall of Assad regime in September 2024, many displaced Syrians are now attempting to return to their homes. However, they face an invisible threat. Vast areas of Syrian territory remain heavily contaminated with anti-personnel landmine and unexploded cluster munitions. These weapons are scattered across all governorates, with particularly high concentrations in areas that experience frequent changes in territorial control during the conflict. According to the Syrian Network for Human Rights, landmines have been intensively deployed by various parties to the conflict without any record for making locations or subsequent removal. The human toll. The statistics are devastating. As of December 2024, SNHR have documented the death of at least 3,521 civilians from landmine explosions since 2011. This includes 931 children and 362 women. Just since November 27, 2024 to April 2025, 205 more civilians, including 17 children and 9 women, have been killed by landmine explosions. Beyond deaths, these weapons have caused severe injury to over 10,400 civilians. Many victims have suffered amputations, difficulties journey for rehabilitation and physical support. Long-term implications. Landmines represent a major obstacle to Syrian recovery. They prevent the safe return to internally displaced persons to their homes and hinder the movement of relief workers and civil defense teams. They pose a significant threat to reconstruction and development efforts, exacerbating Syrian already immense humanitarian and economic challenges. Children are particularly vulnerable, often mistaking unexploded munition for toys. The physical impact on communities living in fear of these hidden killers cannot be overstated. Recommendation for acting. First, the UN and international partners must subsequently increase logistical support to local organizations working on landmine dedication and removal. Second, training programs must be expanded to enhance the capacity of Syrian organizations, clear landmines, and raise community awareness. Third, significant financial resources must be distributed by the UN fund dedicated to landmine clearance. The new Syrian government must be committed to making contaminated area, publishing updated maps, and implementing educational programs on landmine dangers, particularly for children. Fifth, the international community must push the new Syrian government to ratify to the Ottawa Treaty banning landmines. We stand at a critical juncture for Syria. Without addressing this deadly legacy of war, there can be no safe return for displaced population and no meaningful reconstruction. We are talking about 7 million displaced IDPs inside Syria. The time to act now before more innocent lives are lost to these weapons of terror. Thanks for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Syrian Network. You can hear what the video says about the need to act now. I will give a floor to representative of MAC to also make a contribution before allowing for one or two intervention, looking at the time that we don't have much time. Mark, please have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to deliver this statement on behalf of MAC and allow me to add a few personal aspects from previous experience. Casualty data collection is key to advocacy, to understanding risk-taking behavior, to plan for risk education and risk reduction in order to mitigate actions to reduce the risk-taking, to prioritize clearance, as Lisa pointed out. Casualty data is important in data-scarce environments. To put the topic on the agenda. For example, Nigeria, 10 years ago, no one really spoke about explosive ordnance problems in the Northeast. So it was UNICEF and MAC that put the topic on the agenda. The severity of the impact of improvised mines on the civilian population was the core aspect on children. MAC followed up on the excellent casualty data collection started by UNICEF, and then we made advocacy in the Nigeria diaspora in the United Kingdom, for example, had meetings with parliamentarians, supported Nigeria's delegation 5 years ago in Oslo. In Syria, northeast Syria, MAG has been there since 2017, and there was no casualty data collection at the time. So we helped build a considerable database and refer landmine survivors to HI at the time. Casualty numbers in Syria we just heard about are shockingly high, and it was similar in Raqqa after the liberation of Raqqa. Casualty data collection is important in all mine action programs. So I want to add 5 more countries. And Cambodia's, with its CIMVIS, the Casualty Mine Victim Information System, is the gold star. It was set up by HI in the end of the 90s with local Red Cross volunteers. Later it became part of the Cambodia Mine Action Authority and is still running. And you can see the data on the website of the National Authority of the CMAA. Nepal, 2005. Our security guys from the UN were saying, we don't have a landmine problem. Yes, you did. And so it was really educating that improvised devices have just the same effect as landmines and actually are anti-personnel mines. Tajikistan, with the collaboration of the ICRC, we reviewed all of the existing data that was by the Mine Action Center in Tajikistan with the ICRC, both logos on the forms. We visited every single family in the field and identified new people as well. Ukraine, 2016. OHCHR colleagues visited at the time to make sure that the data are collected correctly. Use the adequate subcategories. For landmine blast, UXO blast, it was presented by our colleague from OHCHR right now. Very relevant for Gaza, the MRM CARC agenda. Myanmar. UNICEF has helped to put mine action on the agenda. The word landmine was forbidden in Myanmar 10 years ago. Now it's not. Now the data are all over the place, and all the operating partners, including MAG, are collecting that data that feeds into UNICEF. To end, how data is reported is crucial. Like the data from INSO, ACLED, and so on. They need to have the right categorization. Which device type, was it victim activated or command activated? We have the same problems in the Sahel about the data from Mali, Burkina Faso, etc. Why it matters? Data collection is part of the foundation of mine action. Without the foundation, the pillars will crumble. It's central to advocate for the need of mine action response, and of course, it's particularly important for victim assistance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Mark. Because we are looking at the time, we're supposed to wrap up this activity in the next 10 minutes. So I will allow for 1 or 2 intervention, question and answer. Let me start with you. Please, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you very much. From HI, very short comment. Thank you very much for this very important session. I just wanted to make a short complimentary comment on something that was not mentioned, and this is regarding the IMAS 1310 on victim assistance, that of course mentions the obligation on information management, including data collection, analysis of disaggregated data, and dissemination of this data. So this is really a reminder of that and a call for states to adopt this, for mine action authorities to implement this, and for operators to support on that. From HI, we really feel this is very important and needs to be reminded of all the obligations that are there, and that, of course, then lead to how to implement through what was shared here, because it remains a challenging objective. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that reminder. Any intervention from any question and answer? Any question? Okay, please, you have the floor.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Himayatullah Iblah, and it's not a question, but I just want to have a few words about mine action in Afghanistan. So I'm representing Afghan Technical Consultants, which is currently working in Afghanistan, and it's a non-government organization. I'm pleased to hear the fruitful discussions made by the panel, and in Afghanistan, ATC uses different ways to, from the beginning, to reduce casualties. And in Afghanistan, there are like 10,000 experienced Afghan demining personnel out of job due to shortage of funds. And ATC is ready to work by Afghanistan experienced deminers in any country in the world. Hereby, I request your attention to above issues and find the solutions. And I would like us to really, my idea is that if all of the mine action organizations come together, and maybe we can get different ideas, and we can help better the mine action organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And I think we should try to wrap up this activity. But before I wrap up, I would like to use this opportunity to ask my panelists if they can have just 1 minute closing statement on what they have presented, so that the meeting can have a takeaway, a simple takeaway from your presentation. Let me start with Mr. Meera. Please, can you give us just a concluding statement, something simple that people can take it away?
Yes. Yes. Casualty recording, it is a key, and to mine action, one of the key activity of the mine action program. And if we have a proper data, and of course we can assist victim assistance in a big way. Thank you.
Yes. So proper data can lead to resource mobilization. Thank you. May I move to Francesca, please?
Thanks. Yes, thanks very much. No, from me, really, we have heard a lot of examples on how casualty recording data can be used in practice. My final maybe point is about the need to expand the collection of information on casualties. We still have a lot of contexts where it would be really important to have information about casualties, situations of high violence or conflicts themselves. And of course, the UN is not always in a position to gather data directly. So from our point of view, really, we see a great need to expand partnerships, to build capacity of partners to gather solid information according to the same methodologies, so that they may be available for the purposes we heard and beyond in more contexts than we have now. At the same time, we need greater efforts from states to establish their own casualty tracking systems, especially in the context of military operations, that can provide a platform to engage and exchange with independent casualty recorders. So for me, the point I wanted to make is really expanding the information is critical because conflicts are expanding.
Okay, thank you very much. Government need to be involved, and expanding the sources of data is key. Thank you. I'm asking Mr. Ron, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I've mentioned, explosive ordnance accidents are one of the forms of grave violations as it leads to killing and maiming of children. And this grave violation of killing and maiming is an ongoing casualty recording system. And I would call upon anyone working on mine action to integrate the Children in Armed Conflict agenda into your mine action frameworks, because it will strengthen your evidence base and ultimately help deliver better results for children. The MRM, and particularly the grave violation for killing and maiming, provides a casualty recording system that can help make mine action interventions more evidence-based and more impactful. more life-saving for children and their families. Thank you.
Good. Promoting systematic casualty reporting for policy making and decision making. I think this is a very good point. Ms. Lisa, can you just wrap up with statement?
Thanks so much. I think I'll touch upon something that my colleagues from HI have already mentioned. Collecting data for explosive ordnance and casualties in mine action is a highly specialized activity. And there's not just the IMAS 1310, but there's also, of course, the minimum data requirement that we have in IMAS, and I think that's really key to highlight. And we need consistency when it comes to data collection and analysis, and we need some guidance, especially in emergency settings, on how to share data effectively, how to verify information effectively. We need to learn from each other. I think this exchange today has been great because it has connected the dots to some extent. We need to keep that going, and we need to keep that going amidst a very volatile funding environment when it comes to information management. Right, so now is the time to really streamline and join up on these efforts, because these efforts are more and more at risk. So it's a plea to support data management, because it is, and information management, because it is key for effective programming, and to support local partners in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. So even in expanding the sources of the collection of casualty reporting, we need to be specialized, because it's a specialized area. So thank you very much for that conclusion. Mr. Rory?
Hello. Yeah, just 2 points. I think it's great that we have people like Christelle Loop Forest advocating for the need for IM to the donors. As you mentioned, it's a critical skill set to have, and it doesn't come easy. And if we don't have that IM support as part of the funding package, we're kind of it's inhibiting. And the other thing, just to reiterate what I said early on about the need to have a collaborative approach to identifying the needs, and having GICHD take the initiative to set up these innovation hubs, creating those forums and those workshops really helps us identify what those needs are, creates a channel through which we can deliver on some of the innovative solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your intervention too. Thank you very much for having time to share your experience from the country-based to United Nations to human rights to operational and to some of the best practices. I really have to appreciate you. But before I wrap up the activity, let me try to summarize our discussion into just 5 points and see if it can be a takeaway point that we can use it for our future activities. One of it is the casualty reporting. Casualty recording makes an actions more evidence-based, more effective, and more life-saving. Number 2, casualty recording plays a crucial role in protection, promotion, and fulfillment of human rights. Number 3, casualty recording must be tied to action. It's not only about reporting. There must be action which is tied to action. Number 4, casualty recording is fulfillment of 4 SDG 16 and enhancing the visibility of mine action, and can ultimately contribute to the more just, peaceful, and inclusive societies. And number 5, we also should understand that casualty reporting needs to be invested in more systematic casualty recording system for safe future. With this word, I bring this activity to a conclusion, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us.